I really reached like peak white person drinking White Claw while doing a fucking movie review on the internet. Welcome back to the Spectral Frame. Today we're getting into 2025's Wolfman, but more specifically, we're trying to figure out if this movie is really as bland as everybody on the internet is saying it is. Spoiler alert, kind of. But don't turn away, there's plenty to talk about.
We were in an accident.
Are we gonna die?
No, it's my job to protect you.
We were attacked.
Mike, you're scaring me. Hurry, Mommy, he's coming.
Starring Christopher Abbott and Julia Garner, Wolfman tells the tried and true tale of a man bit by a mysterious beast who begins to transform, very slowly, into a horrible, hideous beast right before his family's eyes. Oh, and they're also being hunted by the beast that bit him. There's layers, man. Lots of stuff going on. Things start to get a little hairy. Hey. I wasn't particularly excited to see this movie based on the concept alone, or the trailer for that matter, but I do have to say I love Leigh Whannell's take on The Invisible Man from 2020, starring Elizabeth Moss. I thought it was a really great movie, so I had to give this one a shot too. I'm a sucker for those old Universal monster movies, so, you know, I gotta see the updates, even if they suck. Thanks, Tom Cruise. But since that whole dark universe thing was scrapped, I have been looking forward to like more standalone, hopefully visceral horror films and updates of those original Universal monsters. And this, you know, this one is an attempt. They tried. And honestly, while this really did not hit the mark for me, there's still plenty of good things about it to dig into, and I definitely want to talk about those before I get into my dislikes a little bit later. We're going to get into some light spoilers throughout, so prepare for that, but I will give you a heads up for the major ones when they come up later.
When I was trying to come up with a new angle for the Wolfman story, I knew I wanted to give audiences something new to experience.
First and foremost on my likes, this movie did not waste my time. If you've been watching my channel, you'll know my biggest pet peeve is when movies just f***ing waste my time. And I gotta hand it to this movie, it definitely didn't.
Do you live in a forest?
Sometimes.
Wolfman opens up to the rural forests of Oregon, where we meet our main character, who's a young boy at this time, Blake, and his father. They're out deer hunting, and we find that his father's really, really strict and kind of an asshole. While they're out hunting, they have this close encounter with a creature, and we don't know what it is really yet, but based on the title of the movie, it's a werewolf. It's not anything mind-blowing or overly scary necessarily, but it's pretty tense and kind of sets the mood for the film. But then 30 years later, Blake is an adult, he has a wife from the city and a daughter, and they go back to his old family homestead after his father was declared dead after being like missing for a long time. I honestly thought we were gonna have some long drawn out scenes of the family getting used to the new house and like their property and all those things before anything happened, but this movie says, nah, f that, we just gotta go. Let's get wolfing, baby. It's really cool the pace they set early because it doesn't really let up. There's obviously peaks and valleys of action and stuff like that to bring that tension up, but it doesn't really waste my time. And God, I appreciate it so much for that. So if you weren't aware yet, this is a werewolf movie. We gotta have some creature effects, man, and this thing goes heavy on the practical effects. They look really good. Think less The Howling and American Werewolf in London, and more like The Fly. We have a long time from the initial bite to the full transformation werewolf, so there's a lot of makeup effects that get added and layered on as the movie goes, and it's handled really, really well. It's gross, dude. It starts as like this kind of gaunt, sickly look, and we move into more like textured skin and hair falling out and those kind of things as he gradually progresses and succumbs to being like the werewolf. Everything just kind of looks sticky, like a 6-year-old after like a birthday party or something. They're just sticky. Kids are sticky. I don't know. I don't like kids that much. My point is they started really subtle, and then each scene slowly layered on more and more things as the transformation went. It does feel like he's just sick and falling apart. Oh.
What's wrong with Daddy?
All of that leads me into another like I have for this movie, the body horror. If you're into Cronenberg body horror stuff, I mentioned The Fly, you're gonna really like this. To see our main character change like this over the course of the movie is really horrifying, especially knowing he knows what's going on and there's nothing he can do to stop it. It really adds to the hopelessness of the film, and I think any body horror aficionado is really gonna get their kicks with this one. All right, who did the creature design on this? Like 33 people. Well, they did a really good job. There's always going to be CG cleanup, but I think a lot of the practical effects really shined through here. It looks really visceral and real, and I gotta hand it to the department. Gross.
It's my job to protect you.
Cut. Very nice.
So speaking of all the werewolf stuff, another thing I liked about this movie is the lore. Here, we're not stuck with a bunch of like mysticism, like full moons and amulets and silver bullets and things like that. It's almost like a sickness, like I said earlier, but now it's just happening and you're stuck with it and you have to deal with it right now. We're not stopping to get an exposition dump on the history of werewolves and where they live in the Oregon backcountry and things like that. There's no time because this man is changing into an animal. What I'm really saying is that Wolfman strips a lot of those goofier elements out. We don't have these big exposition and lore dumps and stuff to deal with. We're just in the moment now, and this is happening. I think this keeps the film moving, but also helps us as an audience buy in and take it a little more seriously. What are we gonna go see?
Wolfman.
The Wolfman. Are you excited?
Yes.
Are you?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, me too. So I saw this movie at a Cinemark in XD, which is like their bigger IMAX format, I guess, and the sound there was fantastic. The sound design in this film really helps sell the transition from man to beast, and there's a lot of like low rumblings and like little tiny specific sounds that I think help sell you on the world, especially when we're in the perspective of the Wolfman. Like there's a scene when Blake, our main character, is starting to transform and he hears something upstairs. It's this big rumbling boom, 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 boom sound. So he goes up to investigate and finds that it's actually just a spider, but his hearing is so tuned now as he transforms, we hear every little step of this spider. Hearing it in a big theater like that was pretty cool. It really helps sell that part of the transition, and I think the sound effects throughout the whole film was pretty good. And lastly on my likes list, there's this really interesting effect shot that director Leigh Whannell does to show the difference between wolf perspective and human perspective, and it's done in a single shot. Basically, as Blake starts to transform, his wife Charlotte, played by Julie Garner, doesn't really understand what he's saying, and he doesn't understand what she's saying. So we get to see in a single shot her perspective, and then flip over to his perspective, where the light is brighter, the sounds are a little more muffled, he can't really understand, but he's more tuned into a different frequency of the world than she is. So even though they're in the same room trying to communicate with each other, they just can't. And we get to see that all in one shot. It might be done too much in a sense, but I think getting to see it a couple times is super effective. All good things have to come to an end, and in this case, they did. I'm done having a good time. We're here to have a bad time now. These are my dislikes. First on my dislikes is the theme of generational trauma. It's not really a problem with the theme itself. We've seen it a lot lately and seen it done a lot better. Shout out Hereditary. But this really, really wants us to make it happen. I think creature movies are perfect for metaphor and exploring themes, but this one only has the one thing to say, so it uses all its emotional impact and everything it can muster to just keep saying the same thing. Basically, this movie thought it was way more poignant than it actually is. We get all these things so early in the movie, but as it keeps going, I don't feel like it really adds to it. It's just doing the same thing. There's a little shorthand connection between the daughter and Blake, our main character, the father, and they keep using that little shorthand, but I don't feel like it holds any weight by the time the movie actually ends. Just roll the f***ing credits already, dude.
What's wrong with him?
He's sick.
And speaking of holding no real weight, this movie basically had zero surprises for me. I think it's a strong intro into the world and a strong setup for the story we're about to tell, but there's no real like twists and turns. It's set up as this slow descent into our main character becoming a werewolf and protecting his family, and then kind of never really deviates from that. It just happens. It's all the standard things you would expect from that. Maybe some people like that, but I think with horror, if you're not subverting me in any real way, I don't have anything to latch onto. It's like driving the speed limit in the middle lane of a highway on a clear, sunny, beautiful day and no other traffic. You're just gonna keep going with no obstacles. Give me some like stray cattle or a flat tire or a fucking spaceship or something. Literally anything to throw me off my expectations. It would work, but not for real the alien stuff. Please, don't do that, please. But to go hand in hand with the expectations, this film wasn't really that scary because of that. We knew what we were getting into the whole time, so with no twists and turns, I didn't find the scares to be particularly effective. Like, yes, the body horror was effective in a more existential, gross kind of way, but there was no actual real scares to be had other than a few really loud jump scares. I wasn't inherently frightened by the Wolfman design, and I also wasn't surprised by the other werewolf that's after them, so it might as well have just been a stranger with an axe or a stranger with a gun trying to get into the house and kill the family. It's the same concept. Now, on a more specific level, there's definitely something I didn't like about this movie that I thought should have been so much better. Since our main character Blake is transforming into a werewolf and another werewolf is after him and his family, there's inevitably gonna be a fight. I'm not sure if it's the acting between the two werewolves as they fight or if it's the way it's shot, but it just feels like two grown men in werewolf cosplay roughhousing a little bit. I really wanted more from that moment and it really let me down. I don't know if I'm the only one who feels this way, so if you saw this movie, comment below and let me know how you felt about that, but I wanted way more, and we just didn't get it. But scaling back out from the scene level, I had an issue with the plot. And I guess less of like the plot and more so the setting. We go from the woods to the house, and then the house to a truck, and the truck back to the house, and then the house to a greenhouse, and then from the greenhouse back to the house. Like, they keep bouncing around back to the same kind of location, slowly unlocking new parts of the map, essentially. You know, part of me understands the practicality of our characters having to go from a safe place to try to get help, and then having to retreat back to a safe space, but another part of me felt like they didn't have enough to do or say in a single location to keep it interesting, so they had to keep switching settings and keep switching things up to keep people engaged in the story they were trying to tell. Which I guess fine, keep the story moving and the things interesting, but also write it different. Maybe this didn't bother anybody else, but I could not help from feeling that way.
We were attacked by some kind of animal, and I think my husband was infected by it.
Alright, we gotta get into a little bit of spoilers to continue my dislikes, so if you want to skip that, go to this time code and I'll see you on the other side. So Blake, our main character, obviously is transforming slowly into a werewolf. As he's turning, he still retains some of those like father, protector, head of the household instincts, and so he's fighting against the werewolf that's trying to get in and eat all of them. At a certain point, he's kind of more werewolf than man, and what they set up was a big turn where he was going to be the villain now. He was going to be the one who's chasing after his family because he's lost control and he has to feed. He's a growling and a ripping and I don't know, whatever the werewolves do. They set up the final leg of the transformation where he becomes like fully werewolf. He's stretched his jaw out. He's looking at the forest and everything looks and sounds different. Therefore, full werewolf, right? But also kind of not. I understand that he's the main character and we're supposed to root for him, and I wanted him to just become that villain before we get to the end. But he waffles so much between the actual villain and the father thing that it never fully transforms for me. I never got the sense that he was ever really a threat to them at all. And that to me negated some of the tension we had set up earlier. At the end, he knowingly lunges at his wife, forcing her hand to shoot him in the face and kill him, which would have been really great if we had seen him become a full villain before that, only fighting and breaking through just at the end to end his misery and end his family's suffering. But we don't really get it, so that death and that big finale doesn't really hit as emotionally as I think it could have, and it really frustrated me. Like, this movie wanted it both ways. It couldn't commit to having their main character turn heel completely, even for like a 15-minute period. I think it would have been really cool and really effective. Like, he is the monster now, and then at the very end pulls back, a little bit of that humanity shines through, just enough so he could die for his family, but they don't really do it and it just falls so flat. I was really annoyed by this, and maybe not everybody else was, but that transition thing just did not work for me. It could have been better. Great? No, I think it still would have been standard, but it would have been more compelling, I think. But that's really it. It's not the worst ending. I just see a version of it that could have hit a little bit harder and made me buy into more of the big themes that it was trying to sell.
Please, Daddy, it's me.
That's the way it needs to be done.
So that's what I think, but I'm only one person, so I like to head over to IMDb and check out what everybody else is saying, but only the extremes. 10 stars and 1 stars. As of right now, Wolfman has a 6.0 rating on IMDb. I would say that's appropriate. All right, let's get into a 10-star review from A. Lopez 14501. All I have to say about this film is that this is truly an original and emotional take on the Wolfman legend and lore. Original, I guess, but I wouldn't say very special. Great performances all around, but especially by Christopher Abbott. The character he shows us before the turn was truly a man worth empathizing with. Yet, even when he becomes the monster, his eyes continue to tell a story through all the hair and makeup. Yeah, I think Christopher Abbott did a really great job. He had a lot of prosthetics and makeup to deal with, and he acted through that. I think he's a really great actor in general. Check out Possessor, by the way. But I don't think he was given good enough material to really shine with in this movie, so I understand it, but I don't particularly agree. Next, we got a 10-star review from MCGA 98638. Set in modern-day 2025, Wolfman is the best take/adaptation of the movie and or creature itself. Better than any other Wolfman movie I've seen. I guess I'm not a particularly huge fan of the Wolfman franchise and or appearance and other things. Maybe I just don't think it was that compelling. The last decade of horror movies has been absolutely horrendous. They don't make movies like Jeepers Creepers, Insidious, Grudge, Blair Witch Project. You just named an entire slate of movies I fucking dislike a lot, except for the Blair Witch Project. I actually do really like that movie. But also, you're holding those over some of the horror movies that have been released in the last 10 years? Are you out of your fucking mind? Whatever. No, fuck this. But now we gotta get on to some 1-star reviews. I'm sure these will be better. This 1-star review is from P. Wetmore 23777. Unfortunately, this movie was worse than Yentl, which is saying a lot. We considered Nosferatu, but decided against it. Oh, you up. It was more than predictable. The script was poor and the acting, it could have been better. I don't understand why it didn't go straight to video. I definitely don't think this is straight to video worthy, but I do agree that it was predictable and the script didn't really do it for me. The acting, while featuring good actors, for sure, I don't think the script or the material helped them in any real way. It had the opportunity to be great, but no, it sucked from the get-go. I would rather watch the original Wolfman with Lon Chaney Jr. in black and white than this movie. Even though I think there's a lot of movies that could be elevated to greatness, I just don't think anything in Wolfman at a base level could have been expanded to make this great, like this epic classic film. So I guess I disagree with that. But yeah, I probably still would rather watch the original Lon Chaney Jr. Wolfman. It's just kind of goofier and more fun. Now we have a 1-star review from Andy RH 56235. Don't waste your time or money on this film. Yes, the camera work was great and the acting believable, but that's where it ends. This rehash of the Wolfman is disappointing. Like others, I don't venture out to the cinemas often these days unless I'm really excited about a movie. The trailer sells it well, ... So someone give the marketing people a medal. Camera work? Serviceable. Acting? Believable. But I have to disagree on that fucking trailer, dude. Everybody in my theater was kind of chuckling to themselves. I think it was a really crappy, goofy trailer that didn't play up a lot of the aspects that I liked about this movie, so I don't know, agree to disagree. The film is slow and lacks what makes werewolf films so alluring, a great transformation. I'll say it again, I really like the way they did this transformation. It was slow and painful. The Wolfman 2010 did an okay job of this, but no werewolf movie has held a candle to American Werewolf in London, and it looks like my hunger for a great werewolf transformation will never be satisfied. I agree. American Werewolf in London has one of the best transformation sequences. I think this movie was smart to forego that, and people who were looking for this kind of thing, like this reviewer, I knew would be disappointed. But I'm glad it wasn't there. I know it would have looked goofy and would have been compared to all these other great movies anyway. Overall, I think Wolfman was a competent enough horror flick. Forgettable, for sure, and thought it offered more than it actually did. I just don't think this movie had anything to really chew on, and I definitely won't be thinking about it in a week once I'm done making this review. But let me know in the comments, did you see Wolfman? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did you think it was just as bland as everybody else thought it was? Let me know. But if you've made it this far, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. Make sure to subscribe and like and hit the bell and all the stuff, all the YouTube things and whatever. And if you stick around long enough, maybe you'll find out if I ever learn how to shave my facial hair so I don't look like somebody's divorced uncle who didn't hit puberty until 27. I was actually 28.